And I'm always excited when we get close to Thursday because I know that we're gonna have some guests on here that sometimes y'all not ready for. But thank you for supporting us and on the Black Podcast. We've been airing for over a year now, and so it's definitely have been. Um, it definitely has been. I'm laughing at my partner over here. He's always making these weird faces. But again, we thank you for your support over the past year and some change. Please make sure you're doing your part. Okay, and your part is sharing the content. In our community, we don't hear enough about other people's stories. We don't share enough about other people's stories. And so just because you may not relate to the story, or you may not think that it does anything for you, you never know who's in your circle who may need to hear someone else's story. So please make sure you do your part and you share the content, you share the video. We always are live on Thursdays. We have YouTube, Facebook, so you have no excuse. It doesn't matter if you watch it later and you decide to share it later. You just need to make sure you're doing your part on the Black Podcast and supporting the Black Podcast by sharing the content. My name is Dr. Sherelle Hobson. I'm one of the co-hosts here for the Black Podcast, and my partner in crime, Dr. I'm called Doctor because he on his way. Okay, so we just gonna claim it, Mr. Brian Street, and he's my partner in crime. I probably get on his nerves about 95% of the time, but he loves me. And so we continue to strive and for our community because we want to change the narrative of our young Black males. So by doing so, we need your support. We need you asking questions, staying in contact, and supporting our guests that we have on these shows because it's not easy to find our guests. We take a lot of time on researching and contacting. So please make sure that you're supporting them, whether they have books or products or anything. Make sure that you're supporting them on their journey as well. Brian, can you hear me?
Yep. I'm over here moving my cup so I don't have it all on
He's a
screen.
little slow boogieing today. So I'm going to need him to pick up the pace.
So, I'm just sitting here looking and thinking and just reflecting on some of the dialogue that we've had over the last few minutes. It's too often, it's far too often that we don't find a way to come together for the betterment of the future, the next generation. We find ourselves working in silos. You know what? I'm going to accomplish this. I'm going to accomplish that. But don't realize that when we connect with individuals that can be that extra piece of the puzzle, we can get to that mission so much quicker. So, like she mentioned, my name is Brian Street. My background is in psychology and social work. I'm really big on changing thought patterns and not allowing what you knew to be true to you up until today to dictate what's going to be true to you in the future. Do a lot of work with individuals in the entrepreneurial space, individuals in the academic space, so on and so forth. But there are certain things that I have yet to accomplish that Dr. Hobson has accomplished. And once we came together, we're able to be so much more of a force. She says she gets on my nerves 90+% of the time. Like it's you. We have to learn that we all have a lane, and when we can say, "You over there," I'm gonna keep running, but like don't come in my lane. But I'm gonna keep running. And we're gonna win this race together. You have to learn each other's dynamics because they. We don't have to qualify they. They don't want to see us working together. They don't want to see us helping the next generation succeed. So we have to figure out how to make it happen. And that's one of the reasons why we have the Black Podcast, because we wanted to boldly leverage the connections for the affluent connections for knowledge. And when we say affluent, you don't necessarily have to have a whole bunch of money in your pocket, but you're rich with wisdom, with knowledge, with resources to help get that next generation to the next level. And that's why we have this beautiful woman before us today,
Yeah.
Dr. Mary Young. How are you?
Hi, how are you today, both of you?
We're
We
doing
are
good.
wonderful.
Well, thank
Well,
you
let's
for
rock and roll.
accepting the invite. I told Brian when I sent it over to him, I said, "Yeah, I want to have her on the show. Take a look at all her stuff." And he was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And so I said, "Well, now you got to wait till she says yes." So now that's the real part, right? I can get all the people that I want, but now they have to accept the invite, and you did. And so we appreciate you I told you earlier before when we first initially spoke through social media and so forth, you talked about, your journey and your vulnerability. And I'm just so grateful for you. And we just can't wait to get started and talk about you, because this show is about you. And we're just excited to have you. And now you're part of the Black Podcast family. And so we want the audience to connect with you on a deeper level. And so I always tell our guests and our audience that behind every glory is a story. And so we like to start off with where you're from and the dynamics of your family, how you grew up. And then we're going to slowly work our way up to what you're doing now and all the other journeys that you have.
So I just first want to say thank you for just the privilege and honor to be able to be on your podcast, because there are a lot of other people that you could have definitely selected. And so first, I just want to say thank you for just being honored to be on here. Just a little bit about myself. I'm originally from Hilton Head, South Carolina. I grew up in a household with mother and father, and actually my great grandmother. So three generations. I'm in a household. Some people that may or may not be familiar with the South Carolina, Georgia coastal area. Some people, they call us Gullah. So if you're familiar with Gullah, some people say Gullah, Gullah Geechee. That's me. I'm Gullah. And so for me, just being able to know who I am, honor who I am, and not be ashamed of where I came from. Uh, in addition, I have one sister and two brothers, and have a husband. We've been married next month. It will be 29 years. I had to think about it. Thank you. He was my college sweetheart. And he and I have three sons, 26, 23, and 15. And so for me, it's once again, that's just a little bit about me and just who I am and what I have to offer in relation to my background.
Awesome. So, when you talk about in the beginning, when you was in, let's say, grade school, can you speak more on like the type of environment, the conversations that were had like in your household? Um, because I know that you got into education. So before we got into that, or before we get into that, I wanted to know more of the journey prior to that, or what made you decide to go into education. Was it family? What was the conversations that you had in the house? If you can talk a little more about that, that'd be.
Yes, and it's interesting that you even asked that question, because when I think about just the educational setting that I grew up in, and this is not to dismiss the county, excuse me, that I grew up in, but my parents, both of them, they had high school diplomas and they went to trade school, and so for them, their desire was for all of their children to do better and to have better than them, to go farther. And so for them, they knew that they didn't have the opportunity, based upon, how they were reared, which is interesting because both my mother and my father, they were raised by family members. My father was raised by his grandmother, and my mother was raised by her aunt. But when my parents got together, and they remained together until the passing of my mother 6 years ago, they were high school sweethearts. But they said when they came together, they wanted to be able to provide something that they had not had. They wanted to give their children a solid foundation from a mother and a father and that type of unit household, not to, dismiss anyone that doesn't grow up in that household, but that was their goal. And in addition, they wanted to make sure that they provided that space for all of their children to be able to aspire for more and to be able to reach their dreams. And so for me, being the oldest of the four, for me, and some people may or may not agree, but it seems like the oldest always gets it the hardest. They, I get it, and then you look down, and then my brother is going to the same concert that I went to in the 11th grade. He's in the 8th grade. I'm like, what? But it's like, okay.
It is,
But,
yeah.
for me, the one thing that my parents, they impressed upon us was, the fact of, you have your name. So I would hear things like my mother would always say, it doesn't matter if you have one dress, make sure that one dress is clean. So they may say, I'm wearing that same dress every day, but they won't say it's dirty. And so for me, it was just that work ethic, my father being able to say, this is what I'm going to do to provide for my family. And so, he worked and he provided. And my mother at the time, originally she was a housewife, and then later became a beautician. And then my father truck driver. So we're talking about degree, non-degree, but able to create an environment where all of their children were able to go to college. And so for me, it was about being able to say, I appreciate them. They've created a strong work ethic in all of us so that we really understand that the other thing that they impressed upon us was our name, And so you would hear sometimes in the South, don't go out there and embarrass us, the name, your name. And so when people see us in the streets, they knew, your name meant something. And so because your name meant something, that let us know that you represented the family. And I remember one time I was in high school, and I wasn't allowed to date. Went to the Walmart, and a guy who I liked was in Walmart. We were walking around Walmart. By the time I got home, somebody had already said I was in Walmart courting. That
You just walking around Walmart. They switched the
yeah.
whole story.
But I mean, but to their credit, it was my boyfriend. But my parents, they didn't let me go out. So then we decided to go to Walmart and go out. But for me, I grew up in an environment where community, they looked out for each other's children. So before I could get home, someone had already called my mom and told my mom, and we weren't holding hands. We were just look like I had just won $1,000. We're just walking around smiling and cheesing. But for me, that was what I was allowed or able to do at the time. But for the community was like, no, we protect our own. We look out for our own. And for me, you know, although times have changed, it's one of those things where when you're built or reared in that type of community, you have a different perspective that you can provide to life and to others, and pretty much how you do what you do and how you aspire to the levels that you aspire because of that solid. They really, when you talk about it takes a village to raise a child, that was the environment where I was. It took a village of various people being able to say, what can we do to pour into the lives of all of the children in the community to make sure that they're successful? And so for me, that's why, I represent South Carolina, Hilton and South Carolina, the Gullah people, because that's just who I am. And that's, our strong work ethic that we provide.
Wow. Wow. And it's when we look at back then, like you're talking about your journey, not only were your parents wanted what was best for you and they wanted you to be better than them, right? I remember my parents always, we want you to do better than we did. We want you to have more than we did. I'm like, ugh. And then my parents, they had high standards and my dad accomplished all kind of things. I'm like, y'all raising the bar too high. So then I went to one of my god sisters. I told her, I said, you're my god. My mother and her mother were best friends. So she was my god sister. And I told her when I was young, I want to be just like you. Everything you do, I'm going to copy you. So she was like, that's fine. So she ran track. I ran track. She did flags. I attempted to do flags, but I decided I needed something more active. And then as we grew up into adults, she went and got her bachelor's, I was mine, and her master's. And I said, now, are you going to stop? Because I'm not going to, can't follow you to the top, And so she got her doctorate, and it's like, she's like, well, you said. And so, but it was good because when everyone is speaking the same language, even though I didn't grow up in an environment where we needed anything or anything like that, it was just everyone was speaking the same language. So if you went to someone's house, they weren't going to let you get away with just, mediocre. And so we have changed, right? That system or that community, whatever, somewhere there's a disconnect. I don't know where. And so I want you to speak on when you went to when you got into college or from your high school going into your college, what was that transition for you? Did you know that you were going to go into education? What does that look like? And then we'll touch more on the whole dynamics of the communities have changed, but I do want you to talk about that journey of when you were in high school transitioning into college. What was that conversation? What was your thinking like? What was that like?
Yes. So when I applied, I knew that I only wanted to go to one school. And so, my guidance counselor was a little timid in my family. And I said, I want to go to the University of South Carolina. I want to be a Gamecock. So that's the only school I applied to. And people were looking at me like, what if you don't get in? And I said, that's where I'm going. I applied, got in, and we moved on. And so when I applied, originally I applied to be my parents wanted me to be an accountant. So this was one of those moments, perhaps, that, something to think about when we talk about our children. although they wanted me to be an accountant, they wanted me to be an accountant because they wanted me to come back and help the business that they had created. And so for me, when I said, fine, I'll go ahead and I'll, be in school of business and major to be an accountant. My first year, I hated it when they began taking courses. And for me, it was about being able to go back and say to my parents, I know what you want me to be, and I do respect that. However, that's not where I'm supposed to be. It just doesn't, it doesn't grab me. It's not an area that I'm interested in. And so, and we went back and forth several weeks, several months, before I changed my major. And so then they were like, well, what do you want to do? So then I said, well, I don't know, but I know it's not business. So let me get back to you. So I continued to, finish school for that semester. And then finally I said, what do I want to do? And so I did what I was raised to do in a family, a Christian based family. I prayed. God is the head of my life. So I prayed and asked for direction. God, where should I be? And that's where education came. And so then I remember the time when I told my dad that I was going to be a teacher, and he about passed out because for him, growing up, he felt like teachers weren't respected. He felt like teachers, it wasn't a degree that, or an area that people really look to being, I guess, you've arrived. That's a nice way of saying it. And so, but for me, I said, this is where I'm supposed to be. And so, and how I knew as a confirmation. But let me back up and also say the other thing that my dad also said was, and my mom, their biggest thing was, they said it wasn't about the students. It was about, unfortunately, their comment was they felt like the parents sometimes gave teachers a hard time, and they didn't want anyone giving their daughter a hard time.
They didn't lie.
Yeah. Do a job where you don't have to deal with, angry, upset parents coming at you. And they were like, really? And then the pay wasn't the best. And they were like, what are you doing? I remember my first job as a teacher, I was making like $20,000 a year. Yes, that's like $10 an hour. And we were working far more than 40 hours a week. So really minimum wage. But my heart was in it. I had a passion and a desire. And so when I switched my major, it was just a light clicked. The light came on. I fell in love. And I just knew that's where I was supposed to be. And I thrived there. And I was able to, graduate and be a successful school teacher. And that was where I was, just teaching.
Wow, that's awesome.
I want to circle back to a couple of things that you mentioned, because I see a little bit of alignment with myself, a lot of alignment, really. So first, you mentioned staying, or you mentioned since you have, in your current state, still staying connected and wanting to do certain things in that space. And I think that's something, even if we're, regardless of what stage we are in, when it comes to our career, whether we've retired because of longevity in the space, our time has come, or whatever it may be, having that tie to where you still stay connected and you have individuals that reach out, hey, will you come on my podcast? But you still like, I guess I will give some of my expertise to y'all. No, but it's great to stay connected the way that you stay connected. I think so many people need to realize that, because there's going to be things that you experience throughout your career that are pivotal for young professionals to know, like a sound, wisdom based insight. Um, Another thing you mentioned was your name, like having to make sure that you don't go out and embarrass that family name.
Yes.
In
Yes.
today's day, it's all about, what kind of reaction can I get right now?
Mhm.
Not taking how it's going to impact anybody else's life into consideration. And the name of my company that I started back in 2018 is called Your Legacy Begins Now, because we
Mm.
also have some people on the other end of the spectrum that feel like, you know what, I don't even like my last name. Like, I don't want nobody to know what my last name is because such and such, such and such and such and such went to prison, got discharged and did that. And I don't want to be connected to that. So I really aim to help people realize that you can start today to recreate what your legacy is going to be and what your name is going to be known for. Um, and then you mentioned you went to school to be an accountant initially. Same here. My dad told me go to school, be an accountant. That's what's going to make the big money, because in the industry that he was working in, that was the one that was like the pinnacle of financial success that he saw around him. So he pushed me in that direction, but I made a 36 on my first exam. So I was like, this is not where I'm supposed to be. Now, coming out of high school, 3.89 GPA, math, like all the high level math, because I was completely connected to the whole experience. But when I got to college, I just wasn't feeling it. And I ended up, eventually, I changed my major a couple times, but eventually I ended up in social work. Who wants to be a social work professional? That's like, I remember coming up when I heard social work, that's them poor fake professionals. Like they don't make no money over there. They want to be professionals. Like that was what I thought about social workers when I was little. But I claimed where I was going to go, what I was going to do. You mentioned where you're going to school. I only applied to one university, and I'm actually repping them today, University
We
of
have a
South.
lot in common.
Yeah, I only applied there because I said I'm gonna get in. I don't want to go anywhere else, and I got in with no problem. Ended up getting my first 2 degrees there. Hold up, no, my first 3 degrees. I get mixed up. Got my first 3 degrees from there, and I started to become who it is that I want to give to the world by taking charge and claiming where I was gonna go. And ultimately, that's what we have to do. We have to follow where our heart tells us to go. And I've
Yes.
been able to make a career for myself in the social work space, but not as a traditional social worker.
Mm,
Whereas I start companies, social enterprises, I partner up with individuals or with companies to generate funds to go towards the causes that I believe in. And when we determine, you know what, this is the direction I'm going to go in, I don't care what the outside world says. That's when we're truly walking in our purpose and we're giving
yeah.
to the world what we're meant to give to them. And when we do that with all of our heart, I believe at least we're going to be repaid. The harvest is going to come in due time,
Yes.
but we have to sow and sow and sow and stop looking for the harvest. I like to make the basketball reference. Just keep playing, keep shooting, stop watching the scoreboard. Don't be a scoreboard watcher. If you go out there and you just give all that you have, the scoreboard is going to take care of itself. So I
Mhm.
just want to kind of add those in and reiterate some of those points that you made, which was so valid.
No,
Absolutely.
thank you. And I just want to add something. So even as you were talking, I thought about like parents who may be listening or children, students that may be listening. And for me, you talked about legacy. And I add, so in front of legacy, I put purpose because I believe that if you live a life that's purpose driven, you're really able to leave the type of legacy that's attached to who you are. So being able to be authentically you, being comfortable with being who you are and allowing the world to appreciate your uniqueness, your talents. One of my quotes by Ralph Emerson, he talks about in the world that's constantly trying to change you. And I'm paraphrasing it. He talks about the desire just to be you. Be you. There's no
Mhm.
one else like you. We will appreciate and love you and celebrate you for who you are. We don't need you to be a copycat or an imitation. And so, if there are hopes and dreams that you have, for me, it's about being able to say, what is it that this world needs that's inside of you? And so,
Mm.
something that I often say to people is, when I die, I want to die empty. So everything that has been put in me, all of the hopes and dreams and talents and gifts that I have. Other people may have them, some may not, but I know what I have. And so for me, it's about being able to pour out and being able to share and being able to do and being able to, at the end, like you said, but leave a legacy based upon my imprint, based upon what I've been given responsibility and charge of. And so that, has been education is where, and I will say, I have a student that I taught when I was in middle school. She was in the 6th grade. I was a 6th grade teacher. And this is just one example. In 7th grade, her mother passed. And for me, in my mind, it was like, oh, she's my daughter. Now, how was it that another woman's child is your daughter? But in my mind, as a teacher, because of my heart, it was one of those spaces where, you know, the children, we were taking care of them. You know, they became our children. You know, we were concerned. And that's when you develop relationships with them. No, I don't have relationships with all children, nor am I encouraging teachers to follow children for the rest of their life. It just evolved. And even now, I still talk to her. I spoke to her like twice today. She's 34. I met her when she was 12, 13. And you will find a lot of times there are many educators that will say they may not stay in contact with every student, but there are going to be students that you'll see in the grocery store, students that you'll see in the mall, and they'll walk up and go, wow, you made a difference in my life. And so they may not see it now, but just know that you're planting seeds that, you know, are going to be watered by someone else. And then down the road, they'll come back and they'll show you, like, I am who I am because you were part of my journey. And so for me, that even the more confirms the work that we do in education.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm gonna let you go, Doctor Hobson. I'm gonna let you go, but I had to jump back in on a few things that you mentioned. I actually titled before I legally registered my company as Your Legacy Begins Now, which is the name of my company. The name, and you'll see it on some of my Instagram content, was "Live a Life of Purpose."
Mm,
So it's exactly as you say it. So many people chase after certain things because society says to go after that. But what purpose are you serving? When you serve a certain purpose, you will fall into your calling. And
yeah,
when you fall into it, eventually you're going to be that individual that everybody else looks at like, why is she always so happy when she's doing this job? Why are you so different? And Dr. Hobson can attest to this. We met through a coaching program, and the name of my class was society defying societal expectations. So
mm,
defying societal expectations, and the subtitle was something along the lines of how being your true authentic self will lead you to your route of success in life, or something along those lines. Because when we stop being that fraud that is trying to be appealing to everyone else because society said you need to be like this if you want people to like you, when we stop being that person, we truly become who it is that we're meant to be. But as
yes,
long as you're living as that fraud, you're going to be ostracizing, indirectly ostracizing those who should be benefiting from you. You're going to be, you're going to be, what word I want to, you're going to be a fraud for those who think you are who you are, but you can't be a fraud forever. You're going to be exposed eventually. And when you're exposed, those who thought they knew who you were ain't going to want anything to do with you. That's a fraud. And those who you're meant to be serving are going to be sketchy about you. I don't know about them because they've been a fraud this whole time. So you just
that's
got to do you. You
that's
just got to
right.
do you.
That's
All
right.
right.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
Dr. Hobbs,
Absolutely.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I love Brian, so it don't matter. I let him get away with whatever he wants. But I really appreciate you, Dr. Young, speaking on your I think it's important, like everyone keeps saying, being who you are. And I remember going into my profession as an educator, I actually just wanted to be a coach. So when I graduated from college, they said, well, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to coach track. And they said, okay, so what are you going to teach? And I was like, nothing, because I'm just going to coach. Like, what are you talking about teaching? And so I had to go back and go to alternative certification, all that stuff to get my certification to teach. And I say all that to say that on this journey as being a head coach, previously, I used to always spend so much time talking about life with my students, right? So study hall would be in there and I'll put a word on the board about choices or hunching or, and the kids like, what's hunching? I say, well, hunching is, like pretending like you're doing it, but you're really not. And it's too close to home. And so I used to speak to them about, respecting themselves. And back then it used to be like, oh God, coach is having another conversation. But it's so important that we teach our students um, to be you, be all that you can be. But I feel like a lot of times the problem in education is that we teach those to the kids, but us as educators don't even believe that for ourselves, right?
Mm,
And so that's why you have so many teachers are like, I've been doing this 35 years. It's like, okay, but what have you done in those 35 years besides come to your classroom, write a lesson plan, put the same lessons on the board, what else are you doing? So I remember sitting in these faculty meetings and everybody would stand up about their 35, 45 years. And I'm just like, I'm not doing this 45 years unless I'm going to be a athletic director or a superintendent or something, because I'm not staying in this classroom. But it was just a mindset. And I think it's very, contradicting when we are teaching our kids one thing and we're living a different way, right? So I decided to challenge myself as yourself and say everything that people said that you couldn't do. Why are you applying to one place? Why aren't you applying to more? And you knowing that this is what I'm supposed to do and this is what I'm going to do. Only us know our purpose and plan that God has for our life. And when we have to spend so much time explaining that to people of why we're making these decisions, it's so frustrating and it takes us off course or out of our lane of what God is trying to take us to, right? And so everyone said, well, why you want to go into education like yourself? And I remember reading Proverbs 18, I think 18:16, when he talked about how our gifts will make room for us. He will
Yeah.
put us in the right room with the right people that need to hear the right message. And so I want you to speak on your journey of education. You decided to be a teacher. So as you went into education to be a teacher, and then that transitioning from, okay, now I'm at the very top of being a superintendent, what's next in my life? What was that thinking for you? So if you can just speak on when you started out in education, and what separated you from saying, well, I just want to be in this classroom forever and not move on to being a superintendent, because those who are in education know that the journey to be a superintendent is not easy. But from the
Yeah.
outside, or the outside looking in, they're like, oh, that's like being a manager at Chick-fil-A. They don't know that there's a small percentage of people that make it to where you did, on top of being a Black woman. Um,
Mhm.
so if you could just speak on when you started in education, and then what was your mindset that made you go into the next level?
So when you say your gift will make room for you and bring you before, great people, for me, that's pretty much been, the story of, my journey. I didn't set out wanting to be a superintendent. I didn't set out wanting to be a principal. I didn't set out wanting to be an assistant principal. The only thing I knew was at that time, I wanted to be a teacher. So I went into the classroom. I was a teacher. Loved being a teacher. Went back to school. I went to Howard University because for me, it was about being able to say, so now that I've gotten a Eurocentric perspective, let me go and get an Afrocentric perspective. Some people may or may not understand that, but I will say those different schools, they give a different perspective and they offer a unique experiences that widens your understanding and broadening of education. I mean, that's probably the easiest way I can say it. Diplomatically, if I'll say it like that. And so for me, went in, continued to be a school teacher. And then I was in the process of wanting to buy a house. And so they said, summer school's open. And I said, oh, I'll do summer school. I'll be a summer school principal. I'll get extra money and I can buy my house, my husband and I. So I just did summer school just to buy a house. So, saved up the money. Then the next year they were like, oh, you did such a great job. You want to do it again? And I said, sure, I'll make some more money. Wasn't even thinking about being an administrator. For me at the time, I was like, this is going to give me
It's
more
good
money
money.
to buy the house. So then about the third year, my principal comes and she says, we have an assistant principal position available. Would you be interested? And I looked at her and I said, I don't want to be an assistant principal. That's not something I thought about. Mine had been a principal for the past 3 years for summer school. But for me, it was like, that's not, where'd that come from? What are you talking about? And at that time, didn't realize it. So then what happened was she then appointed someone else as an assistant principal. And I said, well, that's fine. I'm a reading specialist / teacher. I'll just keep going. And for some strange reason, that entire year, every time I saw that assistant principal working, something in me, it bothered me. Not because I was jealous, but it was just like, it was just a nagging feeling. And I'm like, why do you have this nagging feeling when you didn't want the job? Like you turned it down when she offered it to you to even consider. And so it was just, and so then for me, it was about reflection and saying, why is it that I have this nagging feeling? So then I began to, go back again, pray again. And so then that's when, it was like, yeah, you were supposed to get, move. It's time to move. Your season of being a teacher or reading specialist is over. So then maybe about 6 months later, went to my principal and I just really talked to her. And that was the other thing. I love being transparent. Who you see is who you get. And you saw that, Dr. Hobson, from the beginning. And so
Yes.
I went in and I just told her, I said, I know we talked about the position. I know I turned it down. And I just explained to her, where I thought my path was going as it related to my career. And then she started talking about things that she saw in me that I didn't see in myself and why she thought it would be great. And so then, and I told her, I said, well, if something else becomes available, let me know. So then the next year, another assistant principal position became available. And they said, you want it? I said, sure, I'll take it. And I loved it. And so for me, and then we go back and we move to now being a principal. When it was time to be a principal, my mentor at the time, I had been assistant principal for like 5 years. And I said, I'm just going to be an assistant principal. And they were like, no, you have qualities to be a principal. And so for me, it was about being able to say, okay, so let me go back, regroup, see, and then I began to move on. And so then I said, what are some other things that I can do after principalship? And so, I dabbled in several areas, from being my own CEO of my own company for a year, wasn't sure how that would go, to, then working at the Department of Education, South Carolina Department of Education, and I love, and just once again, just continuing to evolve. So I just wasn't, and I say all that to say, did not start where I knew at the end I'd be where I was. But each step of the way, when things happened, I stepped back, I reassessed, I prayed, and then I moved forward. So I didn't have all the answers. And that's the other thing, because I know that, and I'll give you the example of one time I was talking to my son. This was several years ago. And he said, Ma, I don't know what I want to be, after about the fourth time of him changing major in college. And I said, okay, boy, you're not going to keep wasting our money. You
But
changed your major about 4 times. And so finally, I just said to him, I said, I don't know if you're wanting to be what your dad or I want you to be. And at the time, he and I were in a car, we were just driving, and I looked over. I said, at this point, this is where I am. I said, if you come to me and say, Ma, I want to be a sign maker. And the crazy thing is, we were just driving by a sign. And I said, if you want to be a sign maker, I'm going to say to you, fine, I support you. Just be the best sign maker you can be. And he was like, wow. And for him, that helped to open him up to think about what is it that he wanted to do, because he knew that whatever he wanted to do, he was going to be the best at it, because he knew he had the support of his parents. And
And
so
it released the pressure that he probably
yeah,
felt. Hmm.
yes. And so for me, even so, I'll even go back to just even at Department of Education. There, working, fine, satisfied, knew I wanted to move from there, but just wasn't sure where. And one of my coworkers came to me one day, we were just talking, and she said, I see you as a superintendent. And similar to like what happened when I was a teacher, I looked at her with the Scooby-Doo face. Huh? What are you talking about? Superintendent. That's not something I thought about ever doing. But what happened? Same thing. And for me, it was about knowing who I am and knowing the signs and understanding. So same thing that happened when I went from a teacher to an assistant principal. That nagging feeling. And it was like it just gnawed. Like when she spoke, her words hit something in me. Her words hit something in me. And it's like almost like it quickened it, or it made it alive. And for me, it was like, wow, I actually want to be a superintendent. Where did that come from? And so pretty much I took the next 7 years, although I had already graduated with my doctorate in education at Howard University. So I went to Howard for my master's and my doctorate. And although I had graduated and had certification as a school administrator, because it had been years, and I wanted to be the best at it, I said, well, let me go ahead and, enroll in some different, courses and take opportunities. And so there were several different things that I took, but it was, and also experiences. I wanted to be exposed to different jobs. And that's pretty much what I did. So over that course of 7 years, I continued to take different, sessions. One of the things that I will say that was a program that, not trying to toot anyone's horn, but AASA, Urban Superintendents Academy, which is a partnership between Howard University and AASA. That was one of those most profound, and it was a catalyst really for me, and moving to the area of superintendent. And so for me, that's pretty much how I've been. And it was one of those things where, uh, if you know who you are and you know your, I call it the modus of operandi, you know how. So for me, the patterns were, sometimes I'm able to see it, sometimes I'm not able to see it. But the one thing I'm always going to do is I'm going to pray about it. I'm going to reassess. I'm going to plan. And I'm going to hear what other people have to say. But most importantly, I'm going to hear what's inside of me and where am I being directed to go.
Wow. Wow. I thank you for that. Um, so I I remember having a not the similar journey, but going into education, I was like, okay, I love teaching, I love coaching. Well, not love teaching, but I was like, I love coaching, but I love the teaching in my coaching, right? So in my coaching, I was talking about life, I was talking about choices, I was talking about things that were relevant with my girls. And so it's always a blessing when I see on Facebook or they're emailing me or they're texting me or they're calling me saying just thank you. And now they're 20 something years old and they're lawyers making more money than I am. Um, but I know that, wow, those are the seeds that I planted. And so that's what the big reward is. It's definitely not the paycheck. And my kids ask me to this day when I see them, I'm an athletic coordinator now, but they would say, you got a doctor and you still keep coming here? I said, well, do you want me to leave? So the other day, one of them said that if I had a doctor, I wouldn't be here. I said, you're right. So I got all my stuff and I started walking to my car. He said, like, no, come back. I said, well, y'all don't want me here. Y'all want me to go find something else to do. Maybe y'all right. But so I want to read something to you because I had this this incident one time where I was going through this journey of I want to be an athletic director. And so you hear all the stories of, well, you look young. And I have to tell people all the time when I go in these interviews, well, I'm 40 and I've been in education for 17 years. And so I would always have to say those things in my interview because when they saw me, they would just see they see the curls and the heels and they just think of something else. And I remember getting so frustrated because I kept going on interviews and I felt like people were trying to change everything about me. Well, you have to look more masculine, or you look too girly, or you look too this, or you look too that. And I remember standing by a tree. I was leaning against a tree and I was in the room. At first I was in my room praying, and then I had duty that I had to go outside to. So I went outside, I was leaning against a tree. And this Hispanic lady, she's a secretary. She comes and she says, hey, can you sign this for me? I said, okay. So I signed this paperwork for her and she walks off. Well, she walks off and then she comes back. And she said, I'm not sure where your faith lies, but God's put something on my heart to tell you. And I said, okay. And she said, he said to remind you of that tree that you're standing by. And I said, okay. And she said, that you're like the tree that's planted by the water and your leaves will never wither.
Wow.
And I didn't know what the heck she was talking about. I was like, what is she? I said, okay. And so I wasn't crying. So I was just thinking in my head and I thought, okay, I had just prayed that God, I thought you forgot about me, and that's what I was praying about in my closet, in my office. And so when I went to go look up Jeremiah 17:8, it says that they will be like a tree planted by the water
Yes.
that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when heat comes. The leaves are always green. It has no worries in a year of drought and never fails to bear fruit. And so when I understood that, I said, God is never going to forget about us, even
Yes.
when it's not our plan, even when we have, and I'm a planner. Before my brother passed away, he used to say, everything is not going to go as planned. I'm like, oh, it's going to go as planned because
That's me.
I planned it.
Meticulous. Everything. That's me.
I'm a planner. So I'm like, what you mean it's not going as planned? And so that's a lot of the journey I have to go on spiritually is learning how to surrender and really allow God to speak to me on what he's doing. So I thank you for your obedience because a lot of us, we hear it and it's like, and God is so patient. Thank God, because I know there was things that he spoke to me that I was like, not right now. Not right now. I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm not doing that. And so I'm just so grateful for women or people like you that are obedient and decide to live their life on purpose, because without women like you in front of us to show that, hey, I'm a planner. My journey wasn't, my plan wasn't always my plan, but you made it. And God is continuing to make your gifts room for us. to make room for you. And so I thank you for that. If you can talk about when you became a superintendent, how was that support for you, like in your community? Because people don't like change. And I know that they saw, a black woman being in this, again, in this type of position where they're like, okay, what's she going to talk about? What ideas does she have? I've been fine the way I've been doing things for 20 something years. So if you can speak on when you decided to go in that leadership role and you had this, because you're a planner, so you had this plan in your head of, this is how I'm going to go into it, this is what I'm going to do. If you can just speak on that journey, how was the support for you? Were there challenges? What were the challenges? And just kind of dig a little bit deeper for us there.
Yeah, no, thank you. Because that's a real great place when you talk about just the reflecting. So one of the things that's really interesting when we talk about unpacking that position and who I am and what I bring, first, you talk about superintendents in the United States, where probably maybe 5% of us are African Americans. Let's start there. In the entire, so we're talking about about 15,000 school districts in the United States, and only about four, and that's on a good day, 5 to 6%, between 4 to 6% are African American. That could be male or female. So one, I knew that this was a position that there weren't a lot of representation, and it didn't represent the demographics of the United States of America. That's a big piece. The other thing for me was understanding that wherever you are in the United States, sometimes people don't really want to talk about it, but you see it evolve in the policies and the practices of that community. So I'll give you an example. In some communities where people are very conservative, you have a very different perspective about a topic. Whereas in others, so I'll just give you an example. So if you have the LGBTQ community, I'm not here to support or not support. That's not my stance. I'm saying as it relates to the community, depending on where you are in the United States, it could definitely evolve into several different policies and practices. And so a part of that is, as a superintendent, the one thing you really want to do, you want to make sure you know that community, and you want to make sure that your values align with that community. Because can you imagine if I believed in red and you believed in yellow? The only thing we'd be doing is clashing the entire time. And so one thing that I commonly tell people is, don't just go for the job. Make sure that the same way they want you and they're interviewing you for the job, you also need to interview them, because every job is not the right job. And sometimes people think, well, it's a job, it pays six figures. What's the problem? There can be so many different problems. Money is not the answer to everything, because there are rich people that are miserable. Okay. And so for me, it was about being able to say, where was a great fit? Warren County Schools, awesome environment. As a matter of fact, I still have my house in Warren County. I love the people of Warren County. Warren County reminded me of growing up in Hilton Head, South Carolina, where everybody knew everybody. Everybody supported everybody. And so that was one of the things that really attracted me to Warren County. Just small, rural. I grew up, on a dirt road in South Carolina. There's a lot of dirt roads in Warren County. Like I said, but it took me back to how I grew up. And so for me, that was number one, allowed me to be able to say, this would be a great place. The other thing that I would also say that sometimes I'll go back that people don't really talk about are some of the dynamics of how people receive superintendents. And it depending on the environment, there's a difference between sometimes how male and females are addressed. And even if you are an African American Black person, there's even a difference between people, the way people perceive you and are treated based on your complexion. There are times when I've had to watch myself in how I've said it because of my complexion compared to someone else who may have been a lighter complexion. Because sometimes you'll have people in society, which is unfortunate, that may say, you said it that way. And I may have said it the same exact way Dr. Hobson said it, but somehow I had aggression. And that's a whole nother topic people don't want to talk about.
Oh,
But
they don't want to
that's
talk
a
about it.
part of just you have to understand you and you have to understand the players. And so for me, because I was aware of that, it was about being mindful. So it wasn't, which is interesting. So it wasn't even about, okay, you got the education and the degree. Was that good enough? No. What else? You had to make sure that there was an alignment of your values and your system, and you understand the community and the culture. Is that good enough? No. Now you have to unpack, you're a female. Some people may not like females. They don't think females should be in leadership. And I'll tell you, although I love Warren County, I remember I had a conversation with I will say, a highly uh, titled person in the county. That's a nice way of saying it. And the person said to me, you make the most money in the county, right? And for me, it was about, what did I have to do with our conversation? How did, but that person, and this was when I had just started, but I was going in a community and having meetings with different people. You go out and meet with the mayor, the county, the commissioners, and, just the townsmen. And for me, it was one of those things where they were saying, look, we just want to let you know you make more than everybody in this county. Like, you need to be aware of that. For me, at first I thought I would be offended because of the way they said it. But then I went back and I said, let me really think about, how, what does that really mean? And it helped to really carve and shape how I would move and do things in the county. And so for me, I wasn't flashy. I still drove my
Because
2011.
we were watching.
Yes. You
They're
know,
waiting for you to go drive that, pull up with that new.
yes. And so for me, those are those little pieces that people really don't talk about, because many times people get a job and they go buy a Jag or they'll go buy a BMW, and you come flashing in the county and they're looking like, we can't afford that. Represents how many years of our salary. But once again, it's about you knowing the people and knowing the community. And then the other thing that I would say, and I was, and I said earlier, is just, your complexion, and sometimes how that may or may not have an impact of what you do. But even knowing all of those things, for me, what kept me grounded was being a woman of faith, being prayerful. That's one. That's what, God has had in my life. He leads my life. I mean, no apologies for that. But then the other piece for me, when I think about just the whole dynamics, was just being who I am. And so for me, just being the authentic me. And I believe that that was, and just connecting. When I say love the students, I went and I shadowed, an elementary student. I shadowed a high school student, actually a high school student I shadowed. He was an ROTC. They had me in line. Following the students in line. I had never been in the army or military or anything. I followed the students. They showed me how to fold the flag. They had me doing a sumo wrestler. I mean, it was just, but I enjoyed it because I love the students. And so for me, it was an opportunity to be able to give the students a voice. And that was probably one of those biggest things that I saw in that rural community, was because it was rural, there was limited exposure to the world. And so for me, my goal was to make sure I brought in the world as much as possible to make sure that our students were exposed, because I knew that when they graduated, they weren't competing with students in North Carolina. They weren't even competing people in the Southeast. They were competing a global. So how do we prepare a group of students globally for an environment where they pretty much live within a 60 to 100-mile radius and really don't go anywhere? And so for me, it was about really being able to empower our students. And I would say, there were things that I did that I can say I loved in relation to the budget and finding money. But for me, one of the greatest things that I believe, that I love and I honor is knowing that I made an imprint when it came down to helping students to be able to have a voice and be able to empower themselves so that they could advocate for themselves. And they just didn't allow life to happen to them. They decided how I wanted to live the life that I'm living.
Wow. And you I'm going to tell you the exact number. It says that there's 165 women that are superintendent in the world, and you're one of them. And so it is definitely not an easy journey. And so I appreciate you um, making sure that you stick to who you are and your truth, right? A lot of times we are in position, especially in education, that we have education, we have the system, and then we have our truth. And it takes a gifted individual to be able to merge the two without, okay, I know the right thing to say without getting fired, but I also know that this is relevant to speak on. And so I'm always in that space. But my journey, again, is similar to yours. Is, there's only 168 women that are superintendents. There's only 20% of Black women that are, or women who are athletic directors. And then to be a Black woman as an athletic director, it goes down even slimmer. But I hear people talk about that all the time. They say, oh, well, your mannerism is too sexy. You look to this, you look to that. But just knowing not only who you are, but whose you are is so important. And I tell them, well, I guess I'm just going to be one of the 2% that make it, because I'm going to get there. I don't know when, but I'm going to get there. And so I appreciate, because you're inspiring to a lot of Black women and men. Um, a lot of times we tell ourselves, oh, well, that kid is a product of their environment. Well, you still made a decision on what you wanted your life to be like. And so if it wasn't for you continuing to be obedient, you wouldn't have made room for women and men like ourselves. And so I thank you for that. Now going into where you're currently at in your life and what's the next endeavors for you. Leaving from education, or if you're still in the education space, what, I know you said you're on a new journey, and so if you want to share, what does your new journey look like right now, what and how can we support you in what you're doing?
So you probably aren't going to like this, but I'm just going to tell everyone. So several weeks ago, Dr. Hobson reached out and said, I saw your resume and I saw you've done some wonderful things in education and we'd like you to be on the show. And I don't know, but I said, look, I'm not even working. I
Yes,
I
she
had
did. She's not
look,
lying.
I told her, I said, I'm on medical leave. I said, in 2020, I had breast cancer. This year I had thyroid cancer, and I probably won't be the one for you. I'm at home just trying to get my life together. And she said, no, 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 that's what we really want to talk to. And so when you did that, it was one of those things that you don't even really know, and until I'm saying it now, is that for me, that was another way of God saying, I still have you. That's really when I saw that, because it was like, you know, I was superintendent in the very week that the governor closed school was a very week.
I'm a crybaby, so I'm sorry.
I
Brian,
know the very
Brian's looking
week
like, oh God,
I had breast
you're about to
cancer.
start
The
crying.
very week. And I was just like, in 2 weeks, and because of where I was in the stage, within a matter of me finding out, the school district closed that very week. And April 1st, which was like 2 weeks later, I was starting my first chemo treatment. That's how quick they did it, because of the status that they had said of the cancer. And I remember on April 1st, I said, am I being punked? Is this April Fool's Day? Like, why in the world am I starting chemo on April Fool's Day? But it was one of those things where, and I don't, everyone has their own situation. So I would dare not say what people should do. You just have to do what's best for you. And so we were all at home working virtually, and I decided to just continue working and do chemo, because we weren't going into the office. And for me, it gave me, which is interesting because it gave me a sense of purpose, because I felt like I was still focusing on other people and helping other people and not thinking about myself, because I didn't want to be sulking in the corner, crawled up in a fetal position because I'm like, I got cancer. My hair is bald. Like, no. So for me, I channeled it into the area that was my passion. And what was that? Educating students. That's why purpose matters, because that's what kept me motivated, because I had something to look forward to. And so some people may say, you should have taken leave. No, that's what I did at the time. So went through chemo 5 months, and then I had surgery. And so then, I was fine. And then my doctor came back and said, we found there was some additional things we found when we diagnosed you, but it wasn't urgent. So then I said, okay, great, we'll take care of it. So then when they finally discovered it this year and everything was done, found out I had thyroid cancer. So I'm like, okay, God, what is going on in my life? Like, can we just do one cancer now? And I'm just gonna say that's how I talk to God. So I don't want to be offensive to anyone, but like, can I just do one time and get the testimony? I got it. No. So, it had thyroid cancer, had to have surgery. And at that point, my family actually, unfortunate, my family stepped in. My husband, my dad, my sister, who's an RN, my brothers, they were like, you can't work. You need to take time for you. And so I sat back and I just reassessed and reevaluated where I was and just really prayed. Mind you, and this is the crazy thing. I had already accepted another job. I said, well, that's fine. Superintendent job is really stressful. I'm still, seeing the doctor every 3 months. I'm not out of the woodworks, but I can still work. I can still help support other people in education. Accepted another job and had to call back the next week and say, I can't take it. And it was because I just felt like I wanted to stay busy. But then when I really stepped back and I said, you know what, shut everything down, bring yourself in, began to just pray and reflect. And I'm like, okay, God, I'm here. I'm in this holding pattern. What's going on? And it was one of those places that I will say has been the most rewarding because in over 26 years of education, I've never had a time where I've not done anything but reflect and think about me and reassess where I am. And it's been so rewarding. And so, there's some days I'm good and some days I'm not good. For those that know about thyroid, you go up and down in your levels, you're fatigued some days you're not. But even within that, I rejoice in the fact that I'm alive. I rejoice in the fact that, as we've been on this interview with the podcast, you've heard my voice go in and out. That's because of my thyroid. But I'm like, I'm not going to stop talking. Yeah, it's going to go out. But guess what? When it goes silent, it's going to come back and I'm just going to keep
You're gonna
talking. I'm
continue
going to push
talking.
through it. Because guess what? I'm here. And because I'm here, I still have purpose. And so as I begin to just reflect and say, okay, where am I and what do I need to do? Which is so interesting. So, and I just kept hearing God say, right, right. And so I've been writing, and which is crazy because over the years, I would uh, know that I was supposed to write. I'd write a chapter and then put it to the side because I was too busy. So then I said, okay, God, you have a sense of humor. So now you have me in this holding pattern where I have no choice but to heal. I'm alive. Now I'm healing. I have a testimony, and now I'm writing and doing the things that you already given to me to do. And so they're books that God has given me, and I've started writing. There's one book that I'm in the middle. I'm pretty much almost finishing, and my goal is to look at self-publishing. I'll have that out. I'm looking to also, one of the things that I was able to do was I spoke to a coach, and in process of talking to the coach, and I don't know if it's all right to give her name. Actually, she's a pastor, but she's also a coach. Deshaun Washington. I'm just going to put it out there. She has been. She was the one that wrote the Diary of a Mad Church Lady or something like that. I believe that was the title of her book.
Mhm.
But she coached me, and I give her credit for that because what happened was through that she said, okay, so where you are right now, let's talk about these gifts and talents that you've had and experiences that you had. And we began talking, and she was like, so we're not going to monetize all these gifts that God has put in you? Or we're not going to monetize all these experiences that God has given you? You want to run back to a job, when it's not time? What are you doing? And so for her, she didn't even know. Like she didn't just awaken something in me. Something in me exploded where I'm sitting around right now, crazy faith. By this time, I'm going to manifest this. By this time, I'm going to manifest this. By this time, these are the things that are going to be done. And so for me, when you say what is next, I don't know what's next in relation to if I'll go back and be a school superintendent. I love that. That was a great opportunity. But one of the things, I was talking to someone one time and they said, this is how they explained it to me. And I'll just say it like that. When you were a teacher, you impacted 30 students. Then when you became a middle school teacher, you impacted about 180. Let's go to principal. You impacted 1,000 students. School district, you've impacted from the different counties that I've been in, anywhere from 2,000 to 130,000 students. And the person said to me, it's time to impact more. You're being stretched to impact more. And that's what you need to think about. What is it that God's moving you to be able to be a blessing and impact others? I've coached, and this is the craziest thing. I have people call me all the time, from assistant superintendent, teachers, assistant principal, calling me, and they call and they say, this is what's going on, and I just help them. I said, have you considered it? It's like, okay, that's coaching. You've not monetized that. No, I'm just helping people. I'm at home. No, it's a
Well,
job.
I'm glad that you're that before you started charging, you came on the show. You would have said, "Oh yeah, I charge $1,000."
No, but for me it was about my gift, but also the other piece is saying, where you are right now, what are the things that you need to stop and reflect? So the other thing that I'm also doing, in addition to, I have about 3 or 4 more chapters. I'll be done with my book. If you don't mind, follow me on Instagram. Trying to expand that.
Yes, tell
LOU.
us your Instagram so they can find you.
So it's LOUCRESHA 411. LOUCRESHA 411. That's Instagram. Follow me on Instagram. And then Twitter is LOUCRESHA. Wanted them to both be the same, but someone had taken the other name, unfortunately. But the other thing that I'm in the process of also doing is, many times people, they tend to try to figure out, and it doesn't matter where they are. They can be a college student, they could be, in an area of their career. And I'm sure that you all have seen on the news in the past 6 months, they call it the Great Resignation, an average of about 10 million people resigning every month. And as a result of resigning, they're in a space of trying to reflect, to figure out where they want to go and move. And in the midst of that, although it's not the exact same for me, it's very similar. And so a part of that has been me being able to say, okay, so what do I need to do? So I'm not going to give all the goodies away, but I'm in the process of creating a video and a guide to be able to help people, which allows them to be able to look at their entire life. Don't just look at your career, because you're so much bigger than your career. When you come, similar to like what we talked about, you come as a female, you come as African American, Black, you come as a person with a degree, you come as a person from South Carolina, you come as a person with experiences, you come with your own emotions, you come with your own feelings, your personality. Why, when we think about education, do we say to people, take this assessment, and based on this assessment, you do really well? And I'm not minimizing the ASVAB, but you take this assessment and some of these others, and they said, oh, you really do well in architectural, so you should just major in that. What about your physical life? When was the last time we looked at our physical life? When was the last time we looked at our spiritual life? And I'm talking about looking at it, assessing where we are, creating a plan to be able to say, how do I go about creating a plan for my life in relation to how I move forward and do what I do, and be able to reassess and readjust? That people don't really talk about that. And so that's something, that's another project that I'm in the process of working on, of being able to help people to be able to, and I call it reflect, pause, reflect, assess, and plan. And so, like I said, I can't give everything out, because then, look, then you won't buy it.
Right.
So for me, a part of it is,
Or they'll try to create their own.
yes. And so for me, a part of it is just being able to say, the framework around the edges of what I'm trying to help people to be able to do was to assess where they are, who, as a holistic whole being, assess how they are, where they are, and be able to, and then there I go. And as an education major, of course we know how to create plans for people. As a administrator, yes, we know. As a reading specialist, and here I go. All of those things are things that I've learned along the way to better my craft, but I'm just able to take it we talk about the rigor and relevance. I know the information now. How can I take it and transcend across different spectrums to be able to help and support people? So for me, that's the other thing that I'm also working on. And then I just went back and I said, okay, God, what else do I, you know, can I go and get another job? Because I've had people inboxing me about jobs. And I said, can I go get another job? He's like, no, right. And I said, what else? Right. I'm like, what? Right. So I said, okay, that's fine. I'm in a space where I'm healing, I'm being restored,
You are
and
healed.
yes, and I'm just writing. So that's where I am. And I'm at peace and I love it. And for someone who's been busy, working an average of about 60, 65 hours a week, to now you're sitting there and doing nothing for months and you've never, I was agitated because I was like, I'm the type of person where I always have to have something to do. I always have to be busy. And it was like, no, I have you in a holding pattern because you need to first take care of yourself and heal before you can help other people. And sometimes it's hard for people to hear that when they've been on the go. But at the end of the day, and we say and we preach that all the time, and we say to people, oh, take care of yourself, take care of yourself. But how many people really take the time to take care of themselves and make sure that they're good? Depending on the situation, not a lot, not a lot, unfortunately. And so for me, it's about being able to say, let's take this time and then propel and move forward.
That's beautiful. I was having that conversation with one of my business partners earlier, and we're working on putting together some retreats next week or next month, next year, a men's retreat and a women's retreat, because specifically us in the Black community, we have this innate um, thought process that we just got to go and go and go. Like,
Mhm.
we don't have time to rest. Like, we got to go and go and go. We don't have time to have feelings. We don't have time to, to have mental health things that we need to address. No, you just better man up and figure it out. And that's just so important for us to take that time to breathe. I forget the four different words that you use, but we're gonna let people get the book to be able to
Yeah. I'm
remember.
actually creating a video. So someone told me about a website, and I'll go and I'll post it on social media. But there are places where, like Udemy, different places where you create the video and you create the guide, and people purchase that and use it. And so I will definitely. I'm in the process of doing that, and writing the book. Like I said, but I'm at home and I'm resting. And let me just say, so people really understand, there are days I get up, the only thing I can do is get up, wash up, and get dressed. And I felt like I just ran 10 miles. And those are those days where in the beginning it was so hard because as a person who was always busy, where I would walk 10 miles a day. I mean, I'd walk 10 miles 3 times a week. I did kickboxing, I did Zumba. And so for me, it was about saying, where are you in accepting where you let me say, I said this too. I'm a part of a women's Bible study book group. And I said, this was the word I'm going to say. Many times we give grace to everybody else. And I said, when are you going to give grace to yourself? And for me, I had to learn how to give grace to myself. No, I'm not able to do what I used to do, but I'm here, I'm alive. And guess what? What I'm able to do today, I wasn't able to do 5, 6 months ago. And so what that says to me is I'm getting better. I'm improving. Guess what? I'm cancer free. God is, so for me, rather than complain about the challenges, I'd rather be grateful. And that's the other piece. Just being able to know that there's so much more for me to do, and I'm going to take my time. I'm going to do it, but I'm also going to give myself the space and the grace to do what I need because we give it to everybody else, but do we give it to ourselves? And that's so crazy. You would think, why wouldn't you give grace to yourself? Many people don't do that. And it's like, no, give yourself grace. So on those days when I'm great and I'm feeling well and I'm excited, then I write. And then on those days when I'm not, guess what? I don't. So then I pace myself. And guess what? That lets me know that I'm not going to burn out. That lets me know that I'm going to do what's necessary. And you have some people, they burn a candle on both ends. And then they look up and they wonder what's going on, you know? And so this is how I'll phrase it. They go and they go and they go. And then they actually have an epiphany and wake up one day and realize, how did I get there? Because they were just on autopilot.
Mhm.
How do you live a life on autopilot? Because you're thinking that you're achieving goals, but then the question is, are those the right goals? And who told you those were the right goals? The society? Did God? Did you? And then all of a sudden, there was this quote that I read one day, and it says, "You're going up this ladder of success to look around." Excuse me. You are going up this ladder of success to look around and realize that your ladder was on the wrong building.
Mhm. That's real.
Wow. And you're thinking I'm going up this ladder and I'm just achieving because I'm going up. And going up means that I'm doing it right to get to the top and realize you were on the wrong building. So, what does success really look like? Does it look like you just going up the ladder and achieving, or does it mean you being where you're supposed to be and achieving? And those are two different things.
Two different
That's
things.
so real. That's so real. And it goes back to what you mentioned earlier as far as education goes. Um, it's not about the years you put in, it's about what you put into those years.
Yes,
So, are you doing the right thing? Are you doing it the right way? Because you can get there and look back, dang, I did this all wrong.
that's right.
No turning back now.
That's right.
So,
Wow.
man, I wish we had a mic so I could like give it to you. You
You
just
just
drop
Oh,
it.
you just
you're so
log off
sweet.
and just disappear.
Oh,
It
you're
was
so
beautiful.
sweet. Thank
Yes.
Talking about
you.
talking about some y'all don't want me. You talking
I
about?
said,
Look, I was
I
trying. I
said
said
it.
I was. Well, when I was responding back, I was like, "Yes, we do want you. I don't care what you talking about. I don't know you like that, but I know I want you on this show." So I just
Thank
thank you.
you.
So grateful, so grateful. Um, you you are going to continue to touch lives, um, like you said, to the masses. You've done your to the students, to the teachers, to the admin, to the leaders, and now to the world.
Yes, I'm claiming it,
Yes,
manifesting it.
to the word. I
Thank
mean, to
you.
the
Yes,
world. I mean, sometimes we think so small, right? We just think that God, I just need to be an impact in South Carolina. But God said, I want you to be an impact to the world.
yes,
And so I'm just so grateful for you. And we're so grateful to have you as now our family. And
yes.
so together in your gifts and in our gifts, we're going to impact the world.
That's
And
right.
so I'm just so thankful. We're so thankful. And I just want to tell you that we thank God for your healing, that you are healed. We
Yes,
know that He is a Jireh. He is providing, and
yes,
He is going to continue to do some things for you that you have never seen. He's gonna blow your mind.
yes. And
So we're just
I
happy to be a
believe it.
part of that journey.
I believe it. And I just want to add one thing. Even when I was going through chemo, every time I went to my doctor, I would say to him, I'm healed. I'm healed. And my doctor would look at me and say, yeah, 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 having a positive attitude really does help in this process. And I
He says,
said, no,
no,
no, no, no, no. I'm
you don't
healed.
understand.
When I have surgery, I will be healed. And they said, yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll take out the breast, we'll take out the lymph nodes, and we'll test it. And then if it's cancer, you'll have to go through more, chemo. And I said, there will be no more chemo after I have surgery, and I will be healed. And my doctor, when he got the results, he called me, and the first thing he said was, it was like he was astonished. He said, "You spoke it." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Like in my mind. And I'm like, "Yeah, like what are you saying? You spoke it. You said you weren't going to have cancer, and everything came back. No cancer in the breast, no cancer in the lymph nodes. Like, you don't have cancer." And I was just like, okay. Like, what
You
else?
must don't know. You must don't know the God I know.
Exactly. I was like, I already knew it. I've been telling you that for 5 months. Why? Like, what do you? Okay. But for
Love
me,
it.
that spoke to the testament and the testimony of knowing that it does not matter where you are and what you are experiencing in life. My journey was the cancer. Yours might, be unfortunately a divorce. Someone else may be bankruptcy. But at the end of the day, you can come through. So when we talk about this title of innovation through divergent thinking, no matter where you are in life, no matter what happens to you in life, you can still recreate yourself again. You can still be an innovator, and you can still think and be a divert. And I love it because one of the things I always tell people is I'm a divergent thinker, being able to think about multiple things in multiple ways and being able to evolve and expand. And so I just want to take the time to say thank you. Look, I'm here. I ain't going nowhere. And I give all glory and honor to God.
We love
I
you
love it.
and we thank you again. And we will make sure that we stay connected. And
Yeah,
we are going to set some things up with you later on and how we can continue to impact the masses. But we do want to let you know that you haven't even touched the surface of what God is going to do for you. And so we're excited to be and grateful to be a part of your journey. Um,
thank you. And I
so
appreciate
thank
it. It's
you.
been like I said, it's been an honor. It really has been. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to put you in the backstage. We're going to close out. We do have your Instagram posted. Did you have any emails or something that you wanted to share with people, or you want them to contact you
So
through
if they could
social media?
just do the Twitter,
Okay.
and the Twitter is LOUCRESHA, or the Instagram, which is
Okay.
the LOUCRESHA 411. Those are the two modes that would be good. I'm also on LinkedIn if they want to reach out to me, and they just Google my name and they'll see me on LinkedIn. Those are the three modes that I pretty much communicate with people the most. But I'm going to say you will be looking to see books from me. You'll be looking to see coaching videos. You'll be seeing presentations. You'll be seeing more. All of the things I said that God has given and put inside of me, those are the things you're going to see manifested in the months to come. Because when you've gone through what I've gone through, you have no choice but to die empty. So all of the gifts that God has given me, I'm going to make sure that I take full use and advantage of, to ensure that I'm impacting the lives of others. Because that's what our gifts are here for, to be a blessing to others. And for me, it's about being able to say, how can I use my gift to be a blessing to someone else?
Yep. And just like Mary in the Bible, she did the impossible, and so will you. And
Yes.
so that is
Yes.
your name, and we're just grateful for that. We're going to put you in the backstage, and we're going to make sure
Thank
that
you.
people support you. And every time you drop a book and every time you drop a video, we're going to be spreading it to the masses.
Yes.
So thank
Thank
you again,
you.
Dr. Young, for just being you. And we love you, and we will continue to pray for everything, just for all that he's doing. I just want to be around. Just don't forget about me. When
Yes. You looking at a walking miracle. Okay.
Yes.
Two-time cancer survivor.
Amen. Amen. We thank you for that. We thank you for being you.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. All right. Oh,
Well, we don't have to say nothing else because Dr. Young was just off the chain. She's amazing. And so please make sure that you are sharing this information because again, some of us, especially in the Black community, we are so focused on our professional life that we don't take the time to think about our personal life. And in that, God can shift and change whatever. And so we have to be prepared to make sure we're in position for whatever is our life is going to look like. And so I really enjoyed hearing her journey of just accomplishing all those things, and then God taking her through a whole nother journey that she's now accomplishing something that is totally going to be totally different, but to a masses on a bigger scale. So I thank God for her being obedient and accepting the invite to be on the Black podcast because she did not say yes at first. She said, "Did you make a mistake? Are you sure you want me on the show?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Yes, I do. So, and you picked the perfect title for her. So, very grateful for the partnership and the collaboration that we continue to do on the Black podcast.
yes, indeed. It's another great one, guys. Another great one. Thursdays, as the kids these days say, Thursdays be lit. we
Wow.
we get in there on Thursdays, and regardless of how chaotic the rest of the week has been, during this hour window, like we on fire. So off of that note,
And then
that's
I'll be back
our
on his nerves in about 30 minutes. The
yeah.
thrill is
It
gone
is.
at 5:30.
It's all love. And you know how they say, without gravity, airplanes can't fly. So, you always need that little bit of friction to make things work the way it's meant to work. So, off that note, guys, we'll see y'all the next time. Um,
See y'all.
y'all
That's
stay
this
safe.